Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Mountain Mindset. My name is Andrei Mandzuk. I'm a mental performance coach, professor of sports science, and the founder of Mzk Performance. This week, I'm joined by Robbie Phillips. Robbie is a professional rock climber and a former member of the Great Britain climbing team. Over the last 2 decades, Robbie's climbed countless hard single pitch and big wall routes, both locally in Scotland, while also travelling extensively as part of various international expeditions. During the conversation, I really appreciated Robbie's insights into how he stays present and positive while projecting, and also his openness in sharing some of his personal challenges over the past 12 months. On that note, let's dive into our conversation. Robbie, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
So, kick us off here, Robbie. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep. My name's Robbie Phillips. I'm 31 and a half from Edinburgh, Scotland. I think I've been climbing now for over 15 years. I've gone through the whole transition of starting off indoors, getting into outdoor climbing. Originally kind of was competition climber up until I was like 18, 19 years old. Did a sort of GB team international comp circuit thing for a bit, then got into sport climbing, bouldering. That was focus for many years, and then later on kind of went back to my roots as a Scottish climber, got into the trad climbing, and then big wall and multi-pitch stuff. Kind of traveled the world climbing places like Patagonia, El Capitan, and Madagascar, all those sorts of crazy places, and that's kind of just led me up to now. I'm pretty much of an all-rounder, really.
Yeah, you being an all-rounder is something that's always really impressed me about your climbing career and how varied it is in the tasks that you take on and the routes or boulders that you climb, from big walls through to kind of the single pitch stuff locally.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. I think it's one of those like you're not a what's the term for it? You're master of none. I can't remember. What is the phrase for
Oh,
it?
like a jack of all trades?
Jack of all trades. That's it. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. And sometimes it can feel a little bit like, especially when I've got the background of having been performance sport climbing and very focused on that and the high end grades. And sometimes when you come back from like an expedition or you've been up trad climbing, you feel really weak and rubbish when you come back indoors, and when you go back on like a hard boulder or a sport climb, it can take a bit of a knock to the old confidence. But I think that what I really like about it is that it's never a dull day. There's always something new. You can climb every month throughout the whole year. You can go winter climbing, you can go bouldering, you can go sport climbing. There's always something new to do, always new challenges, that cover the widest spectrum from physical stuff through to mentally challenged stuff. So I think I really enjoy it for that, really.
Yeah, something I'm really interested in diving into maybe a little bit later on in the conversation is some of the crossovers there between the different disciplines that you're involved in. So how, skills transfer maybe psychologically, or maybe sometimes they don't transfer too well. I think that's it's a really interesting avenue to explore.
Yeah, certainly. Definitely just like to talk about that.
And then what's something that we might not know about you?
Okay, so I saw you'd asked that question, and I wasn't really sure, so I asked my girlfriend just before getting on this call, and she was like, "Well, maybe you like cows." So I brought my tea mug here. Cows are my favorite animal. Had the Highland cow, but no, I honestly don't know. Maybe that I don't know. I flipping don't know. I like cows. I love animals. Animals are like really big part of my life. I guess I'm a professional climber and I climb a lot, but I've got animals in this house, and I love my animals. I guess yeah, that's probably a good one.
And that's been something that's been present throughout your whole life, kind of from
Yeah,
childhood through.
yeah. So like I grew up with dogs and cats and a farmhouse. Actually, we don't have like farm animals or anything, but we've got like a lot of land around us. There's like squirrels and rabbits in the garden. So growing up with all the animals has been pretty nice. And yeah, I've always had like a good close relationship with all the animals I've owned. Yeah, so yeah, that's probably my other thing.
It's been interesting to hear that as a common theme. I think throughout these interviews, I've interviewed a lot of people who really like animals, and it's been really
Yeah,
interesting to hear about kind of that side of their life, especially when we look at them as pro climbers or athletes outside of that.
yeah, yeah, certainly. Yeah, for sure.
So, Robbie, when you reflect on your career to date, have there been any standout moments along the way? Anything that's really kind of stuck with you?
Um, yeah, so I was thinking there's probably two things I think that were really big milestones in my career for two very different reasons. I'd say that the first one was actually, I guess, climbing related, but not related to performance as such, more like a career development thing. And that was the point in which I decided to pursue climbing as a career, to try and like actually make a go of, making climbing financially viable. I'd left school. There was a bit of pressure on me to go to university to do a degree, and I went to a very good school, and I got the grades to go to university, and I went to study biochemistry. But like the only reason I was going was because I guess I felt that pressure, that societal pressure, and need to do it really, which I think a lot of people feel. But I knew that it wasn't for me, and about 6 weeks into the course, I made a decision that I wasn't gonna continue. I wanted to climb into life, and I remember the exact, moment standing outside the university, having just spoken to my, I guess my lecturer, my the I don't know what you call him, you're sort of like the teacher, the professor that you see, at the university who kind of deals with you. And I told him I wasn't going to be going back to university and I wanted to pursue climbing. And he was like, "That's cool. That's fine by me. You can do that. It's your choice." And I remember standing outside the buildings and just being like, climbing is going to be the rest of my life from now on. Like, as of now, that's all I have to think about is climbing. And I can remember that just filling me with so much happiness and joy, knowing that. And at the time, I remember not knowing how I was going to make money. I wasn't sure how I was going to make a go of it, but I was determined to make it work. My parents have always been massively supportive of me. And the one thing they said was, so long as you can make this financially viable, so long as you can actually make a living, and they wanted me to make a good living out of it. They didn't want me just to be living on the breadline. They were like, come on, you need to be able to actually make some money. So I was like, so long as you can do that, then we're happy to support you. So I was like, I guess like from there, I kind of had a real determination to make a career and not just work in a climbing center really and make enough money just to like to kind of do the one or two trips a year. I really wanted to make a good career of it. I wanted to, if I was gonna go down the coaching line, which you went down, which initially I did go down the coaching line. I wanted to work with the best climbers. I wanted to help people perform. I didn't want to just kind of do the birthday parties and the taster courses. I really wanted to help everybody, I guess, from sort of amateur climbers get better at climbing, to perform better, to achieve their goals and ambitions, everything up to like GB team members who were competing. So yeah, I guess that was like a really pivotal moment for me, choosing to make climbing a career. And yeah, I'd say like from a climbing perspective, in the actual realms of performance, I think a really huge moment for me was actually not that long ago. It was when I completed the Alpine trilogy, this trilogy of hard alpine rock routes in the European Alps. And when I finally did the last one, it was the culmination of of like many years of training and focus, and a sort of, like, it's a bit cliche to call it a dream, but it was like an objective I'd had since I was probably like 16 years old. Since probably the year after I started climbing. I can remember the day I first heard about the Alpine Trilogy. It was on a drive back home from Malham Cove in Yorkshire with my climbing mentor, Neil McGeeky, and he mentioned it to me, told me about them, and it really planted the seed. And the Alpine Trilogy, it requires such a whole host of skills, from being physically, very capable, to being mentally strong, being able to deal with runouts and changing conditions and in an alpine environment. And in my mind, from a very young age, I thought, how cool would it be to be that climber that can deal with all that and go out there and succeed. And I guess I started that journey early on, and in the sort of the many years of training that I did through my GB team, time, in competitions, through the sport climbing phase, and then eventually into the sort of like the trad and multi-pitch phase, that all built up to allowing me to complete that. And then seeing the completion of that, standing on top of the Wildekaiser in the Austrian Alps, was just like, yeah, life-changing moment. It was like I realized what I was capable of doing, that I could set a goal and achieve it.
So I've got two comments there. The first of which is to do with making a career or making a go of it as a pro climber.
Yeah,
And I'm curious how you broke that down in terms of like the career aspect of it. You seem like you've always been really driven to pursue different avenues and be really varied and really take like a high performance approach to the professional aspect of climbing.
yeah.
But what I'm curious about is how did you go about breaking that down? Was that a lot of trial and error? Was there kind of a plan from the start? And then how does that breakdown look for you these days? Obviously, you have a fantastic YouTube channel. You do some speaking, some coaching.
Yeah. I guess so early on, I mean, from the very beginning, it was right. I need to make money so I can go climbing. So the simple job, a very simple thing I could have done was get to the climbing wall and get a job at the climbing wall and start making some money. But I knew that that environment was going to be really healthy for me to develop my climbing skills, because I was in a climbing wall all the time, hanging out with really good climbers. That's where all the good climbers hang out. That's the most of the good climbers had jobs at the climbing wall. Um, but it's also like I guess it's also like a good environment to develop other skills that go that really help for developing a career in the climbing industry. You develop coaching skills. I was really focused on that early on, and then route setting skills. I had an amazing opportunity to not just to route set in the climbing center, but also to like set for national and international competitions. And that really gave me a massive boost to being able to travel internationally and set in other countries. And then of course, um, I guess as I was doing that, I was meeting people, I was traveling, and I was kind of slowly building a reputation, I guess, not just as a climber, but just also as somebody who had a set of skills in the industry for in various ways. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily had like no, I would say I did have a plan, I did have strategy, but that has always kind of changed, and it does change as time has gone on. I've tended to do the things I wanted to do, but always with the approach that I wanted to do well in them. If I was going to be coaching, as I said earlier, I wanted to be coaching performance, and I wanted to help people get the most out of what they had and develop their skills. If I was route setting, I wanted to set the best routes. I wanted to learn what the best route setters were doing, and I wanted to set for the national and international competitions. And and yeah, so I was always very, I guess, performance orientated in kind of every aspect, very motivated, very driven. And yeah, I think that as time went on, I perhaps, you know I guess, like, my interest in following, like, purely coaching and route setting and being an indoor climbing wall, that kinda changed. I became much more interested in the outdoor, world, and trying to spend more time outdoors. And, I saw an avenue for getting involved with brands. And I guess, like, I had already made a name through coaching and, in the competition scene, and I was doing quite hard rates outdoors, and so you kind of get like a few articles here or there on UKC, and if you make a few videos, that sort of thing. But you develop a name, and then you get to know the reps at the brands, and I made some really good contacts early on, with like Edelrid, a German climbing gear company, who have sponsored me since I was 18 years old. And also like I guess Evolve climbing shoes were my first shoe sponsor. And then I went over to Scarpa, and ever since I've been with Scarpa, it's been like I've had an amazing relationship with them, and they've allowed me to do some really cool stuff. And then also with like Patagonia, and I guess like my career just really has really developed in a very different way since I got involved with sponsors. I started like it was kind of a bit about like organizing trips, content provision, writing articles, getting involved with media, and again a whole host of new skills that I had to develop. But it was always really interesting and challenging. And again, I always wanted to do it the best I could possibly do. So if I was writing, I was excited to try and get an article in the magazines, or to try and write for Patagonia's journal or something, which is like a really high end place to put your writing. And yeah, I guess like I don't have much more to say about that. I think that was pretty much it, really. Yeah.
Is that drive to be either your best or the best, however you want to term it? Is that something you see outside of climbing too? Or is that something that's exclusively within your kind of climbing sphere?
Um, I think it's probably something that I guess I'm quite competitive internally. Like just inside me, I am a very competitive person. And I think like early on in my life, it was competitive with other people, but I've had to, I guess like over the years, and especially when you're in climbing, like climbing is such a wholesome environment generally. And although there is competition between individuals, it's very friendly. And I think changed that early on. I changed that competitive drive against other people to being more about just improving me and being the best I could be. So it wasn't about being the best anymore. I gave up the dream of being the best climber in the world quite a long time ago because I realized it probably wasn't going to happen. But I wanted to be the best climber I could be, and the same in the sort of like the professional realm as well.
And then my second question was to do with having this long term goal from your teenage years and then finally achieving it maybe in your late 20s or early 30s. And
Mhm.
how you went about, I guess, breaking that down or taking steps towards that. Was that always something that was on your mind? Was it in the corner of your mind? Was it something you dip away from a few years and come back with an enhanced skill set? What did that look
Yeah.
like?
Right. So I guess, as I said, like the seed was planted very, very long time ago. Um, and I would have always had it in my mind that I wanted to get into those higher, big wall, multi-pitch, high alpine rock climbing routes. From like fairly early on in my sport climbing, I kind of, I guess I knew I wanted to go there, but I didn't know how, and I didn't, you know, I just didn't know how really. I didn't, and so I didn't necessarily like really push for it until I was in my mid 20s. But I think because I knew the Alpine trilogy was the thing I really wanted to do, and that was the thing I wanted to do, and I knew the grade of the climbs was about 8B plus or 514A for Americans. I knew that I had to climb that level in order to achieve it. So I basically set about trying to in my sport climbing, trying to climb in the 514s and above 8B plus to be able to sort of feel comfortable in that environment, at least physically. And then I can remember it was 2013, I think it was, when I first went and tried something really big and scary. And it wasn't in one of the Alpine trilogies. It was more like it was a taste of what that sort of thing is. And it was Bella Vista on the Trecime de Lavaredo in Italy, in the Dolomites. And after I went and did that, I really had a feel for what being in this environment is. I understood it, and although that was much lower level than the Alpine trilogy, I was like, right, I can climb this level. I can climb 80 plus fairly quickly. These routes are multi pitches. There's lots of hard climbing in them, but I know that I can climb the maximum grade. So I've just got to go out and try them really. And and then it was just like the year after 2014 when I went and tried the first, and it was just a case of I know I can climb it. I know I can climb it physically and technically. I've climbed a lot at that grade. I'd done like, you know, probably 40 or 50 8B plus routes. So I knew I could achieve that grade. But and I knew what the exposure was like, and I knew what the environment was like from having done Bella Vista. And then it was just a case of going out and trying it, and that's what I did. I tried it, and then I did the first one, and then I decided after that that I didn't want to do them year after year. I wanted to give them a year between, so I could do some different things in between and explore different stuff. And so I just did it like that. I did. I think it was 2014 was the first one, then it was 2016, and then it was 2000 and oh no, it wasn't. It was 2015, 2017, 2019. That was it. So yeah, it was like a 2 years, a year between each one.
Were there any major tactical decisions that you made when approaching those routes? Often we'll break down sport performance right into physical,
Yeah.
psychological, tactical, technical. And you
Yeah.
mentioned, you had the physical capacity, the mental fortitude, and the technical ability to climb at that level. Were there any tactical decisions that you made when approaching them?
Yeah, I used, I mean, like the most obvious one was using fixed lines to be able to work the pitches, to break them down into essentially their parts, each pitch by pitch. Um, I knew that if I could, climb the hardest pitch, then I could definitely climb the easier pitches. So I guess it was first and foremost about making sure I could climb the hardest pitch, putting the time into that, and then working out the easier pitches. And I took the same. I had the same approach with every single one. I would arrive. I would go ground up the first day, literally climb from the bottom all the way to the top of the wall, just so I could be like, I've ground up this, and then take a load of static and just like put from the top of the route all the way down to the bottom, and then spend however long I needed working out the pitches. The thing about these routes is they're not it's not exactly it's a queue of people waiting to get on them. You tend to be up there on your own swinging about on a rope. So yeah, I just broke it down into chunks really, and took it like that. And when I felt comfortable pretty much on every pitch, not necessarily comfortable, when I felt like I could do every pitch, I would just go for a red point. So Silver Geyer, I red pointed on my first red point go. Like the first time I tried to do it, I did it. And that was like a massive confidence boost. And I ended up having, like, I did that early in the summer in my Alps trip, and I ended up having probably one of the best seasons I've ever had in my entire life. And then in the End of Silence, the other one, that took me a bit longer. We'd had really bad conditions. I had one red point goal and that failed, and then had to come back a couple of weeks later when the conditions had changed a bit, and then did it with an injured finger as well, actually. And then the third one, this Kaizenoi Kleider, which is the hardest, that one took me the whole summer because we just had this brutally hot and very humid summer. And me and my friend Mish, we were just like finding it so hard to work the route. But we just waited and waited for the conditions to align. And the day the conditions just seemed to be there, we just went for it and did it.
Yeah, that must be such must have been such a powerful experience to do it first red point and then to see that mindset shift over the years of trying these routes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I guess like something else I was going to say is yeah, I think can with these routes, it can be kind of a bit of like it plays with your head quite a lot because it's much more. It's not just about being physically strong enough or technically good enough to climb these things. Like when I was on Silvergeyer, I I remember the first day, just as I just said, like you don't tend to find other people on this route. So on the first day, there was another person on the route, and I remember seeing this two guys up high on the route, and me and my friend climbed up to them, and just these two German guys, an older guy and a younger guy, and I was asking them if they tried it before, and it turned out the younger guy had tried it for like the last 5 seasons, and he said he'd fallen off the last pitch every year. And I was like, "Oh my god, this is crazy." I was like, "How hard do you climb?" He said 9A plus. I was like, "Jesus!" I was like, at the time, I probably only climbed like 8C, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is gonna be I'm out of my depth now." But then it was really funny. I just like I just decided to like try it anyway, and I had I think 4 days of working the route and figuring out the pitches, and the fifth day I went for a red point and did it, and I was like, oh. that's really funny. Like, it wasn't like it went down easily. I had to try really, really hard. But it just shows you that it's not really about how hard you climb. It's keeping things together. There's so much more to it. It's being able to like try hard when it really matters.
Yeah, I think you're speaking there to the complexity of the sport, right? Very often we're tempted, especially in climbing coaching, I think, to break down climbing to these like X's and O's where it's like you're this strong and so you climb this hard. But
Yeah,
really, there's, especially in that environment, so much complexity going into performing.
yeah, totally. And you know what? I've over the year. I mean, I think like yeah, you're right. Especially in that environment, there's so many things going on, and and yeah, you don't have to be the strongest climber to do really well. But equally, in every other discipline, I'm always surprised by people who perform at the highest level and yet compared to this other person aren't nowhere near as strong. I mean, like, guys who can boulder, font 8B plus 8C, but can't dead hang one armed off a lattice edge or a rung, and I'm like, yes, doing it for the weaklings. you know?
Yeah, we talk a lot about the psychological side or the mental or tactical side being such like a difference maker at the top level, especially in sports. I mean, in climbing too, but sports outside of climbing, where it's like there's a lot of athletes who are good enough to be, World Cup level Olympic athletes, but the difference maker kind of maybe comes down to those small percentages we gain elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
What about any challenges along the way? Obviously, you've had this, 2 decade long plus climbing career. Have there been any major challenges or setbacks? And then what effect did they have on you at the time? And even in hindsight, looking back, how have they changed maybe your course or trajectory?
You know what? I had a good one for this, and I've completely forgotten it. Any setbacks? Um, I've been quite lucky that I haven't really been injured for any length of time. So I mean, that's been a really positive thing. Um, oh God, any setbacks? Um, I mean, I guess I guess like to some extent, this last lockdown has been pretty awful, I guess. Sorry, I had a really good one. I've completely forgotten what it was.
Yeah, let's
Uh,
talk about lockdown. How have you been spending your time over the last 12 to 18 months? Obviously, I have a lot of listeners from North America, and things have maybe been a little bit different for better or worse here. But I know the UK has gone through some pretty strict time periods. How's that period of time been?
yeah, so I guess like early on in lockdown, it wasn't too bad. It was like quite novel, in fact, quite fun. It's like I guess for like at the time, like a decade of my life, I'd been just moving from one project to the next, and I'm quite an obsessive personality, very high energy, and I don't tend to rest very much, which is quite bad sometimes. But lockdown really forced me to just to like basically have no plans and no goals, and just to really, I guess, like reflect on where I was going and things. That was like the first lockdown, and as a result, I think I left that lockdown feeling energized and psyched, and everything was going in a really good direction. And then the second lockdown happened, and I guess this is probably I guess I would call this my biggest setback purely, but it's quite a difficult one. It's quite a difficult one to say it is a setback, but I'm still living through it in a sense. I just lost my dad, like, and I was, able to do and find peace, in myself. So that was a really difficult period. It still is a really difficult period, because it was, only like I don't know 4 or 5 months ago or something like that. But I think like although it was really difficult, as things have kind of eased off, getting back out climbing again, getting back with the crags, not, I guess like I went through a stint where I was training really, really hard and I felt like I was going really, really well. And but then with no end in sight with the lockdown, I did kind of let it just I decided to halt the training because it was getting too much. And so I just allowed myself to relax, get out climbing and enjoy, just the local crags, which to all intents and purposes are totally shit. But I don't know, I found like a lot of enjoyment in just going out climbing and trying climbing some choss, climbing some rubbishy routes, but just finding sort of like small short term goals in them. And yeah, now things are easing up. Psyched to basically go and do some proper climbing.
Yeah, that must have been. I'm sorry to hear that. That must have been really hard to process, particularly without, I mean, at any time, but without the normal coping mechanisms that we might have in like a less restricted lifestyle. And
Yeah,
it sounds like you found that by being able to get outside a little bit more and returning back to maybe what you find most enjoyable about climbing as an activity, even if it does
yeah,
involve climbing on kind of local chossy quarries and whatever you have around you.
yeah. I know exactly, 100%.
So, what mindset do you approach life with? Do you approach performance with? We touched on it a little bit as we went there, but how do you kind of perceive that?
Um, so I think I've always generally been very positive as an individual. As a youngster, I think it used to annoy people how positive I was. Um, just that little annoying kid who just is like super psyched all the time and just wants to know everything about climbing and what everyone's been up to and stuff, and tell everyone like how what I'm up to and what I want to do. And I guess like so positivity has always played a huge role in my climbing. But I think even more so than that, like trying hard is like super important to me. I want to know that if I am going climbing or doing anything, that I'm just trying my best, trying my hardest. I think like the biggest disappointments I've had throughout my climbing career, and I guess I only think of a few ones that really stood out, were like times that I felt like I didn't try my best, and I didn't give it my all for whatever reason. Early on it might have been because I was dealing with the fear of failure. Like in a competition, I was like allowing the pressure to get the better of me, and then I just wouldn't try my hardest, and I would give up before I had a chance to fail, which is failure in itself. And then I guess like I learned to manage that better. I learned to deal with it better, and basically came to the conclusion that so long as I'm trying my hardest, it doesn't matter if I fail in a climb. I've gone out there, I've given my all, and that's all you can really ask.
I think that lines up so well with when you were talking about kind of wanting to be the best you can be in business, the best you can be in climbing, the best you can be in representing the brands that support you. That all
Yeah,
seems like it aligns really well for you.
yeah, yeah, for sure, definitely.
Have you found that's changed a lot over the years, or has that been pretty standard through your adult life?
Um, Again, like I think, kind of as I said, like in the early days, I I certainly struggled with pressure, and I really had to learn, how to manage that, and how to essentially try hard and not feel that pressure, not necessarily not feel the pressure, but just learn how to manage it better, just learn how to kind of like push it to the back. And I can, like I've certainly over the years, used certain strategies um, to kind of overcoming this, and slowly over the years, it kind of just became ingrained into my psyche just to always go out and try hard. I mean, even like climbing today at the wall, I actually had a campus board session yesterday. I've got a huge big flapper here. I actually cut my thumb chopping onions the other day there. It's absolutely horrible. It's disgusting. And it's like a really bad cut. So I had my thumb taped up, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do anything today. I felt terrible. It was hot. It was humid. And I pulled on like an 8A plus 8B thing, and managed to like get up it, just screaming from about halfway. So I was like desperately trying to, and by the end of the session, I was like falling off on 7Bs, but still trying hard. So, yeah, I think that has been I think obviously, as I said, I think I've come a long way since the early days. But I think I've kind of figured it out, and um, yeah, my psyche now is like really good for just trying hard.
You mentioned there's been some strategies that you've kind of acquired over the years, and that's actually something I really wanted to chat about. I want to chat a little bit about, are there any psychological tools, strategies, techniques that you use on a regular basis, either for performance or for wellness? Obviously, they're so interlinked.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd say like the key strategy for performance is very simple. It's like a very simple thing that I used when I was scared to fall, when I was learning, just when I was like 16 or something, and I was reading Rock Warrior's Way, trying to learn as much as I could about how to overcome the fear of falling. And I just learned, I read about this thing like called a mantra, just basically like a set of words that you can use in your mind to just kind of get your psyche set in place for performing. And at the time, my mantra for falling was one more move. And it was just simple. It was just simply just to think about one more move. Just as long as you can think about the next move, just complete the next move, and then you can think about the next move, and then think about the next move. Don't think about the quick draw. Don't think about falling. And I use that because quite often I would get above a quick draw, and I would put my foot on a foothold, and I wouldn't want to move. I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to take my hand off the clip. I would just be like frozen. But this one more move mantra just allowed me to kind of keep pushing, and then I would find myself in better positions, and I could flip, and then I could progressively try harder. And then after a while, I found that although I had kind of overcome the initial fear of falling, or helped manage it a bit better, I still was struggling a bit with the fear of failure. So when I was trying really hard things, I didn't want to fail, or when I was in competition, I didn't want to fail. So I ended up using the same mantra for that. And I can remember on an 8C actually in Spain. Um, I'd only tried it once before, and I knew the top. I didn't know the top section very well, and it was all these little bad footholds, and it was weird sequence, and I hadn't. Again, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I remember getting to this jug and like shaking out and just looking up and thinking one more move, just focus on one more move. That's all you need to think about. And I remember like the top sort of 10, 15 meters, just basically just like one more move, one more move, one more move. And I just, it was great because I just focused on the climbing. I didn't think about anything else. And I got to the top. And I've used that. I guess I used that for a time, but it just became, as I said, it became ingrained in my psyche. So I don't really think about it anymore. I hardly ever use it, just because I kind of always try hard now. So it's kind of okay. And I guess like that was climbing performance. And now like in terms of like a sort of, I don't know, like managing yourself, like self-help sort of thing, like mental health sort of thing. Um, I don't have any like real strategies for that, but something that I think I am quite good at is always just talking to friends about things. So, if I ever have any issues or any problems, I've got good friends who I just talk to about it, and just even if they don't want to listen, I'll be like, whilst they're bullying me, I'll be like, by the way, I want to talk to you about this, and I'll just kind of open up. And I was like, oh, Robbie, that's too much information. But no, that is. I think that's something I've always been pretty good at. Is kind of just like putting my heart on my sleeve and kind of talking about things.
And that's really an environment you create, right? Like you start to kind of build that comfort with people around you and normalize that. And I think that's a real kind of important way we're looking as a society in recent years to start to
Yeah,
normalize kind of opening up about some of that stuff.
yeah, exactly. I think like especially amongst, well, I mean, I get amongst everyone, but like a lot of guys like have this sort of bravado, I guess. Like it's quite classic, isn't it? Classic guy, thinking that they have to be super strong. And I think that you know I know that I can be a bit like that. It's I don't like to show weakness, but I do. I understand it's important to talk about things when you're not feeling good, and it does help massively. So yeah, I think it is really important. I think it definitely like it's coming out a lot now. I think, and it's good to talk about it. And I guess I also use. I guess that's another thing actually is with the social media stuff. Um, and one thing I did notice during lockdown was, I was feeling really. really bad because there was other countries that were not in lockdown, or perhaps it was people that live next to amazing climbing. And I just felt this. I was like, Jesus, like I'm stuck here. My life is falling to bits. I'm super sad. Like, and I've just lost my dad. Like, there's loads of things going on in my life. I'm just really flipping depressed. And I was looking at all these Instagram images and feeling really, don't know what I was feeling jealous, feeling sad and depressed. And then I looked at my own Instagram and I was like, do you know what? If anybody was looking at my Instagram, they'd fucking think the same thing. Sorry about swearing. They'd think the same thing. They'd be like, Robbie's having a bloody good time. He's like out there, smashing rocks in his quarries and all this stuff, or like, training hard on his board. And it made me think, actually, I think like as somebody who, I guess not just as somebody who has a following, but it's even more important that I do, is I think I should probably share that everything's not 100% in my life, that there are, I do have issues, I do have problems, just like everybody else. And so I actually actively decided to start sharing more of that. Not just the climbing stuff. I know people love the climbing stuff, but I think that it was really important to kind of like, share. Just by the way, just gonna say this, I'm having a shit time. I know probably a lot of people are having a shit time as well, but just so you know, it's not all roses over here as well. Just because I figured that might be the case. Other people were looking at my Instagram feed and bad on it, and actually, I had like a really positive response from it. I had lots of people get in touch and be like, "Oh, they were really happy that I shared that," and I've seen a lot of people sharing similar things. So I think it's really important that is done. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I totally agree, and I think you touched on it. It's really important for people like yourself who others look up to, and younger athletes kind of aspire to kind of maybe follow in your footsteps a little bit to really start that normalization process. I think that's I mean that's just like really good work on your part. So I kind of thanks on their behalf, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Totally. I mean, I mean, again, it stemmed from my own feelings. I was just looking at. I was looking at people and being like, "Oh, you're having a great bloody time out there, aren't you?" You know? And then I took a step back and was just like, "Yeah, like, I bet there's people looking at me and thinking the same thing." So I just decided to do a bit of sharing, I think it was a positive thing. So I'm gonna keep trying to do that.
Yeah, what's the quote is what comparison is the thief of joy, and just, someone always has it worse and someone always has it better, kind of thing.
Yeah, 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 totally. Yeah.
Circling back around to your point earlier about mantras, I was curious what comes up for you when you kind of repeat that phrase, one more move. Is that something that keeps you present? Is that something that kind of drives you to push a little bit harder? What feeling does that create for you?
Um, I would say, I mean, I'd probably say like a bit of both really. I guess like one more move is forward. It's like you're moving forward. There's no going back now. It's just like, come on, we've got to do this. So try hard. Don't let go. Just keep moving. So that is, I guess, like that's the emotion, I guess, that it instills. But I think when climbing isn't like a cyclic activity. It stops and it starts, and there's definitely moments when especially outdoors, you get to a rest, and then suddenly you're out of the zone again, and you're on a rest, and you can think about things. You can think about how high you are. You can think about what the gear is. You can think about what you've got to do now, and it's just like, oh god, it can become overwhelming. And I guess again, that one more move just gets you back into the zone. It brings you back into that performance zone where you've just got to act. You just got to move. You just got to action, and get going. And so I think that, yeah, it does. I would say it does a bit of both there.
And I think what you've provided there, very often when we talk about self-talk from a sports psychology lens, we can use it in two main ways. We can use it for affirmations, which is what you're talking about. So we can offer ourselves positive or helpful reinforcement, kind of like be our own biggest cheerleader, give ourselves important reminders or pointers as we go. And we can
Yeah.
use it a second way, which is more to reframe. So taking the unhelpful thoughts that are coming in and, thinking about them rationally, offering challenges to them, coming up with basically a structure to kind of battle with them. And I think you've
Yeah.
just provided a perfect example of the first one of those with how we can develop these affirmations and tell ourselves kind of what we need to hear in the moment, and be really intentional with that as opposed to waiting for it to kind of happen to us and just taking whatever comes to our mind.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Yeah. Definitely.
And I think it's a really important point. Particularly, you spoke a little bit about the stop start nature of climbing and the amount of times I think all of us have had the experience of getting to a break and then looking down and being like, "Well, that cam's a long way away." And actually, it wasn't very good when I put it in. And then you're looking up and you're like, "Oh, this next bit looks spicy." And then suddenly
Yeah.
you're totally not focused on the climbing. You're focused on the consequence and the risk and what's happening around you and that dog's yapping at the bottom of the crag. So I think it's a really really great strategy you developed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks. It's definitely helped me in so many situations over the years. So yeah, definitely, it's good.
Are there any habits or routines that you have been a real game changer for you, or that you kind of frequently engage in?
Um, habits, biting my nails probably. um, I mean, I, I wouldn't, I wouldn't necessarily, nothing that comes to mind. No, no necessarily habits or routines. I guess from a physical stance, something that I do before actually really hard thing set. If I'm training, I always tend to have like a very short fingerboard session just to like really like engage my fingers because I found out like I guess like I don't know 5 or 6 years ago that I found that fingerboarding before hard climbing was like really good for just getting me ready to pull hard, just getting my fingers and forearms ready. Something I've started doing with the crag is just taking along like a little fingerboard. But I've also got these other things which are basically like they're like little plastic edges which I put a sling on and I put it on my foot and I just stand at the bottom of the crag and I pull really hard. But that's like a sort of physical bit of prep that I think has been mega helpful. Um, but I guess like nothing. I don't know. Not really much of a routine sort of person, really.
No, I mean that's totally fair. It's always
Yeah.
really interesting to hear the differences between athletes there, and I don't think there's no right or wrong, right? Like some people are very driven by routine and structure, and some people kind of like to figure it out a little bit on a day by day basis.
Yeah, I would say like ages ago, like years ago when I was doing competitions, I remember reading this thing about it's good to have a routine and it to be the same routine every single time you go, and then you know that you're ready. Problem I found with that was if the routine was even slightly off, it would put me off. And I think that my brain's probably too chaotic to really have the same routine every single time. Or if I did manage to have the same routine, I would focus way too much on the things that didn't go well. So I found it was just much easier just to like show up and be like, "Oh, you got your warm, you got I got my warm up. I always kind of warm up, and then I always kind of do a bit of bouldering or do a bit of fingerboarding, and then I'm ready to go." And it's a fairly basic routine. There's nothing special about it, and but it's not exactly the same every single time, but it works for me.
Well, it sounds like you've done a good job of coming up with a structure that's flexible enough that it can accommodate those little changes, right? And it can, roll with the punches of what's going on while
Yeah.
also kind of serving your needs.
Yeah, and I guess also, the sort of climbing I do, I'm never in the same environment. It's not like I go to a climbing wall every single day and I have the same same traverse I can do every single time, and then the same fingerboard and the same edge and same weight. It's like some days I go to a boulder where there's literally only like a font 8A and that's it maybe. That's all I've got to try. Or I wake up in the morning on a portal edge up halfway up a big wall and the pitch is 513C or something. So I've got to be like, right, 513C for breakfast it is. How am I going to get warmed up for this after like 3 days of nonstop climbing? Um, you know, I'll just basically like go up the first clip, pull on the edges, get warmed up until I feel ready. And I guess that's a thing. I've developed like a keen sort of understanding of how my body feels when I'm, at any moment. I know when I'm ready to pull hard. I know, I know that I can get away with climbing on small holds at this point. And so as long as I get to that point, I can then perform. So I have just to know, I know how that feels. And it gets intuitive of me, but it's been developed over many, many years of being in these situations.
Yeah, that awareness must have come about so much from the variety of experiences you've had, right? It's like we don't develop that awareness if we're doing the same thing on a regular basis.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. And it's funny, actually, I actually have a funny story. I was climbing in Germany, and I was in this big group of really good climbers. It was me and Tommy Caldwell were climbing together, and there was Killian Fischuber and Angie Eiter, who are like really obviously like famous like competition climbers. And it was like a helicopter, and it was like a really amazing Austrian climber and a bunch of other really strong climbers. Basically, we rocked up to this crag in the Frankenjura, and they were like, "Oh, what are you going to warm up on?" And me and Tommy looked at this 7B plus, and we were like, "Oh, we'll do this one." And then one of them was like, "That's a shit warm up," but we both like looked at it and we're like, "Well, like the first 10 meters looks quite easy, and then it doesn't look too like bad after that. It looks like it got the crux at the top. So I reckon the first part of the route will probably warm us up really well." And it did. It did warm us up really well, and then we were able to do it like as a warm up route. And then one of the girls who was with us was just like, I've never seen anyone just like warm up plus 7B plus in Franken. Like, I guess, and Tommy was just like, was what you do when you have the big wall, like you just wake up in the morning, you have to do something pretty hard. So you get used to it, you get used to the feel. So, yeah. So, I mean, I don't obviously condone warm ups like that all the time. And I think it takes like almost like an understanding, an intuitive understanding of like what you're capable of doing. And obviously like I can look at the rock and kind of tell what's coming, and it kind of it works for us. Yeah.
And probably like a humility, right? In terms of knowing how hard you can try without injuring yourself and where kind
Yeah.
of the ego is coming into play and all that stuff.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, like I know that if I got to a point where I was like, this is actually too hard, I need to like probably pull back, I would just sit on the rope and it would be absolutely fine. And I'd just take that on the chin, really.
Definitely something we learn over time. It's a lesson that's hard learned a lot of time, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, 100%.
Is there anyone over the years you've been really inspired by, and is there anything in particular that you've learned from them?
I mean, like in climbing, there's just so many amazing climbers that you can take inspiration from literally anyone. Anyone who's performing at like a high level. If you're looking for inspiration for performance and for getting better, you just literally have to look at any of the world's best climbers. One person I would say, you know, who I actually haven't climbed a lot with over the years, but I climbed a bit with him, is Dave McLeod. I think Dave McLeod is like an absolutely amazing climber, and he is somebody who is self-confessed weakling. Like he doesn't consider himself a very strong climber, and I've seen him climb indoors, and I would agree with that. He's not like a good indoor climber, and there are kids at the wall who would burn him off, and yet he boulders on 8C. He climbs 9A. He climbs 9A on trad. Like his stuff, like the stuff he has put up in Scotland, that none of it gets a repeat, hardly ever. And it's not because it's necessarily in the middle of nowhere. It's because it's bloody hard, and it's bold, and it's scary. And he approaches climbing like a surgeon, and that's something I've really been inspired by over the years, and in the times that I've climbed with him. It's just his attention to detail, and it's something I've always tried to. I think it's something I've always had I've naturally gravitated to as well, in terms of the approach I have to climbing, like breaking things down to their, basic parts, and trying to get really detailed with the technique and the movement, and understanding kind of what I need to do to achieve. But I think that Dave actually does it at like, a PhD level. Like, he's like, as I said, he's a surgeon. He takes these little details, and he knows what to do, and he can bring a climb down to his level. which I think is really cool. We were actually like hanging out last year a wee bit, and we were chilling out in the van, like having a cup of tea. And he said that he wants to be the weakest climber to boulder Font 8C. And I was like, no, Dave, that's my goal. Yeah, I think it's a really good attitude to have, because I think like the common approach with a lot of young climbers now is they just want to be the strongest climber. They want to, there's the old Wolfgang Gulick quote, like was it power? No, power is never enough. Or no, whatever, no power. You've never got enough power, or something like that. I, I'm always a bit like, well, yeah, but if you're a really good climber, then you can use what power you've got. You can use more of that power. You can use it better in a more efficient way. So I guess like I was always the sort of person who wanted to become as good as I possibly could be, so that any strength gains or any power gains or any fitness gains I made were like made tenfold by the skills that I had. So yeah, I'd say like Dave McLeod is like I think he's the epitome of that approach to climbing, and for that I get a lot of inspiration from him. Um, and I think like from a taking away from climbing, just speaking, personally, my own father, he wasn't a climber. There's no other climbers in my family. My dad was just someone who worked incredibly hard but loved what he did. And when I was young, he would do long days. He owned like a little bathroom shop, and he's very very stereotypical Jewish man. He was like a proper like Dell boy. He loved like selling. He was a salesman. And like I used to look at his life and think that it was horrible, because he was always working. He was always working. He was always at the shop. Like he never really rested. But actually, I've just the way I approach climbing, I've seen so much of my dad in me, and I guess like I don't know if it's necessarily natural, or perhaps it's learned behavior from just over the years from seeing my dad. But even more so now that he's gone, I take a lot of inspiration from him, and knowing I guess the sacrifices he made for his career, and for his business, and for his family as well.
Yeah, that sounds like such a fantastic environment to be raised in, with that kind of behavior being modeled.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
I'm curious if you've received any really great advice over the years, or anything that's really stood out to you.
Yeah, yeah, I've actually got like one moment which I think was amazing, and it's a very simple thing. I was climbing with it was actually on the Alpine Trilogy. It was on the final route, this Kaizen Kleider. I was with my friend Mish Kemeter, who's you know Mish is he's not like the world's most famous climber. He's really well known in Austria as being this wild guy. He's always got a smile on his face. He tries super hard, and he climbs up to 8C plus, probably 9A. If he really if he tried harder, and we decided to go and do the Alpine Trilogy together, or the final Disguiser together. And on the final pitch, on the red point go, I knew I could do it, and I was feeling good, and I went for it. But the pressure was getting to me, and it was the first time I'd felt pressure in so long. And I think it was because I realized it was like this was the final route, the final pitch. The sun was going down. I was like, there was so much at play, and I took a fall quite early on in the route, and I had a wee bit of a tantrum. I was like getting really angry. And Mish is like, he just got this really cool attitude. He's smiling. He's like, just chill out, man. Just keep smiling. He just said that, just keep smiling. I was like, all right. I sat down there. I was like, I'll just keep smiling. Okay, I'll enjoy this process. It's hard to do that in those moments. I belayed Mish. I came down from that point in the route. I belayed Mish. Mish smashed it. He just did it first go. And I was like, Christ, all the pressure in the world is now on me, because I was questioning if Mish has done it now. Like, is he going to come back up here and belay me another day? There's all these things like, oh God, and Misha just sat with me at the belay and was like, just keep smiling, man, just keep smiling. I was like, all right, I'll keep smiling. So I forced a smile on my face and I was like, right, come and find the inner joy of just going climbing, and I did, and then I just floated up the pitch. I allowed myself just to try hard, not to be disabled by the fear of failing, and I smashed it. And I got to the top just before the sun set, stood on top of that mountain, and it felt amazing. And then you know, when I abseiled back down to the belay, because I was literally standing on top of the mountain, that was the end of the route. When I abseiled back down to the belay, Misha was standing there smiling, and they've got this amazing footage. He was just like holding the camera of me abseiling down. I was like screaming, and then he'd drawn in chalk a big smiley face on the rock right next to the belay. And a part of me wonders if that chalk's still there, because I don't think there's much water, not much rain gets there. But I love that that was his approach, that's his attitude. And Mish, I guess he's somebody who's quite annoyingly happy all the time, because you're like, nobody can be this happy, but he is. And I think that that was a wonderful lesson, right there and then, just to keep smiling.
That's such a powerful moment, and thank you for sharing that with us. It sounds almost like euphoric, topping out, and then being like, "Oh, this is it."
Yeah, yeah, probably. I mean, like, again, as I said at the beginning, it was like the culmination of so many years. It was the final route of the trilogy. It was a goal, and it was a wonderful moment to for all to end with. Just standing on top and smiling and being there with a good friend.
Yeah, you can see from just how you talk about it how impactful that has been, and how kind of fondly you recall it even a couple of years later now.
Yeah, yeah, I really do.
If you were to offer like a younger Robbie any advice, if you were to think back, roll back the clock, 15, 20 years, if you were to offer kind of Robbie Phillips starting out as a rock climber any advice, is there anything that you'd say to them?
Um, it's funny. I had to think about this as well, and I honestly, sometimes I think to myself, I started climbing when I was 15 years old. I was like, bloody Adam Ondra climbing 9A when he was 15. I was like, there's kids at the climbing wall today who are 15 years old who are climbing like 8B or winning, championship medals. And my life up to 15 years old was that of like a normal kid. Just like running around like the hills with my mates, like playing hide and seek, and not, no real sports, like no performance oriented things, just kind of like a normal sort of childhood sort of thing. And I sometimes look back and I think, if I could just tell Robbie to start earlier, then you'd be so much better now. But, you know, I think who I am right now is a culmination of, you know, everything that I've done in my life. And I like who I am as a person. I, sometimes I wish I climbed harder, but wishing never gets you anywhere. You've got to actually go out and do it. And I don't think that I would necessarily want to change any of that. So I don't honestly don't think I would give him any advice. Maybe boulder outside a bit more, because I've got weak ass fingers. That's the main thing. That's the thing I struggle with the most. I wish I'd bouldered more when I was younger, but that was about it. I think I've gotten to a pretty good level, doing what I've done, and I'm happy there.
And that speaks again so powerfully to just the butterfly effect of if you change anything earlier, then it has this knock-on effect on the trajectory of what goes on down the line.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Um,
and I ask that question to a lot of people, both as part of this project and just in my day-to-day life, and you would be amazed how many people share your opinion and your stance on that. I hear time and time again that actually, like, despite the challenges and the setbacks and the stuff that could have gone differently, I'm happy.
yeah,
I'm happy with what I've got now, and if I change anything, then that would change that too.
yeah, totally. And I think, you know, if you're the opposite, it's almost like having regret, and regret really doesn't help you. It's you've got to. I think like reflection is really important. and reflecting on what you've learned and things you've done. And if you can give advice to younger people or other people, not necessarily younger people, but anybody else coming into sport and trying to teach them, the things you've learned the hard way so that they can learn faster, then that's great. But, you shouldn't have regrets. You should be happy with what you are and always be looking forward, always be trying to do one more move.
Talking about looking forwards, what's the future look like for you? Do you have any kind of big plans or projects on the horizon? Anything you're really stoked on?
Yeah. So I guess obviously like in the UK, we're not obviously not in a lockdown anymore, but there's still restrictions on travel and international travel, especially. I mean, we can travel within the country anywhere we want, really, but we can't go abroad. And I think I've taken that as like a really positive thing. You know, I'm not looking at going abroad anytime soon. I'm quite happy to stick with the British Isles. We've got so much awesome climbing in the UK, um, across like every discipline you can imagine. So I'm just psyched to explore more of my backyard. We're going up to Orkney to try the Long Hope Direct, which is a Dave McLeod route, like an E10 on arguably the UK's highest sea cliff. This is mega, like 400-meter, face, in Orkney, which is almost as far north as you can go. We've also got a trip in July to St Kilda, which is this insane like group of islands west of the British Isles. It really is out there on its own. It's part of the British Isles, but it looks a long way away, and it's a really wild place. Um, there are no inhabitants anymore on that island, and there's just wild formations. So I'm looking forward to going and doing some exploring and first ascenting out there. And as for a bit longer term, I'm really motivated by big walls and going and doing more of that sort of stuff and first ascending, especially in big wall environments, also in like higher altitude or the higher mountains. And I've had this trip that I've been planning for 2 years, but it's been blocked by lockdowns, and that's to Pakistan to the Triangle Towers. So we originally planned to go last year, then we couldn't. So we thought we might go this year, but I've decided that I still think it's fairly unethical to travel internationally, even if you could. I'm sticking with my guns, and I'm gonna not put anyone at risk. So I think that we'll probably look at doing that next summer. So that's probably my next really big goal. Really, yeah.
That sounds like an amazing set of plans, and I'd highly recommend anyone listening or watching checks out Dave's video on the Long Hope. That's a really, really high quality short climbing film, and really starts to showcase a little bit of what Robbie's talking about. What does your support system look like? Who have you got around you? Who's in your corner, either on a personal level and also on like a company level? I know you mentioned some earlier.
Yeah. So I guess like my girlfriend is like a massive support. Mary, she's in the other room there. She's always like I mean, she's a climber. She's not a professional climber. Just has like a normal marketing job. But she's always like been a massive support to me, and a real like uh, I guess like when I'm struggling with whatever issues I'm having at a time, if I feel like I'm climbing rubbish and I come back and I'm like in a bad mood, because like most climbers, my happiness is intrinsically connected to how well I'm climbing. She's always been like the shoulder I cry on. So, and she's always got good advice. And my mum as well, like she's always been a massive support in terms of sort of like sponsors. I think I'm pretty lucky that I work with a good group of brands who all have very ethical stances, and like their ethos align with my own. Patagonia, Scarpa, and Edelrid. And I've been with Edelrid, as I said, since I was 18. So it's a long time. Scarpa since 2016, I think it was, and Patagonia since the same, actually, Patagonia since 2016. So I like building these long term relationships. I like um, I like the idea that these brands and the people that work for them and end up becoming close friends, and it kind of feels like a more like a family environment than anything else. I'm lucky that I have that, and they've always been massively supportive. But I guess like that's another thing. I remember Neil Gresham actually gave me a really good piece of advice early on in my professional career, and he said that sponsorship is not a right; it's a privilege. And if any brand or anyone saw something in me and thought sought to like support me in any way, I always felt very grateful for that, and I wanted to do anything I could to say thanks and to help them. And so I've always seen it as a two-way street, which I guess is like why my professional career and the way I work with brands is very hands-on. I'm not someone who just like I call myself a professional climber, but I always like to use the professional climber because I just see myself as a climber who works in the industry. I work for these brands. I give as much as they give, and what they give allows me to have the freedom and flexibility to do some amazing things, and I'm grateful for that. So yeah, I always do my best for them.
It sounds like those relationships over the years have just continued to be so mutually beneficial for both yourself and for the brands that you represent.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that they're always improving and changing slightly. And especially like for example, more recently, of the last like year and a half, we started a YouTube channel, and I saw that as an opportunity in multiple ways. I saw it as an opportunity to support a friend who wanted to make films. I saw it as an opportunity to support my sponsors who obviously got more visibility that way. But I also saw it as like an amazing opportunity to just basically, um, well, to share more of the sort of fun I have with climbing with the rest of the world, and to share skills and lessons I've learned. Um, but also as a means for me to look back, almost like a diary, and look back at these climbing trips I've been on, and these adventures with my mate Cullen, who's the filmmaker. And the thing that I like about those YouTube videos is when I look back at them, you know, they're obviously edited in a way that is fun, but I look back and I watch them and I think the way they're it's always exactly how I remember it in my head. That is what happened at the crag. There's no extra things we've done. We've not like tried to edit it in a way that's fake. That's how it was, and I want to share that fun approach to climbing. You don't have to be like super serious. You can take it seriously. That's cool. Take it seriously. I take climbing seriously, but enjoy it. And that's kind of what we've tried to do with the YouTube channel.
That sounds like such a wonderful time capsule of kind of these moments in time that you can always look back on and they're kind of immortalized now in those films.
Yeah,
And
I watch them back all the time. I go back into the archives and watch the Joshua Tree ones. I'm like, oh, I remember that. That was such a good trip. I want to go back again.
I'll be sure to put the links to Robbie and Cullen's channel and all your brands in the description. People can check them out if they've not already. It's highly recommend giving it a watch. There's tons of really great videos on there.
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks. Cheers.
Robbie, I can't thank you enough for your time today. I really, really appreciate just hearing all your insights and getting to pick your brains about this stuff. And I can't wait to share it with people. Honestly, do you have an one takeaway for us or any closing words, final bits of advice?
Um, I guess just enjoy climbing, try your best. That's all that really matters. I guess that's kind of like the my that should be like my motto or something. That's pretty much what I talk about all the time. Yeah, yeah.
And
I'm lucky.
it's a new Twitter bio for you right there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, thanks very much for having me on here, and I hope everyone enjoys the podcast.
Robbie, where can we connect with you? Where can people follow along your journey? Where can they stay involved? Where can they see about kind of your upcoming trips?
Yeah. So like I tend to keep Instagram like fairly, that's the most up to date sort of social media thing I use. Just like at Robbie Phillips _. I think it should be pretty obvious. It's the one where my face is like this. And then obviously if you click on it, there'll be loads of climbing pictures. And then the YouTube channel, we do like a weekly video, and that's like it's it's like as up to date as it can be. We're not like organized enough that we have usually loads of videos in the archive. We're pretty much working on like a we'll do a video and then we have like and then it comes out. We'll do a video and then it comes out. So we need to get more organized with that sort of stuff, but it's pretty up to date. And as I said, like a lot of the archive stuff is really good fun. Um, I think we've just continued to improve on the quality of the videos. So yeah, you'll get to see lots of cool stuff coming up.
Amazing. Again, I'll put links and people should go follow along. There's a ton of really amazing content coming out there. And yeah, finally, Robbie, thank you again for chatting with me today. I know this has been a real honor to have this conversation and get to talk about this stuff with you. And hopefully, it's offered some insights for everyone kind of listening into what goes on behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah, thanks very much, man. I really appreciate you asking me to come on here.
Thanks for joining me for that conversation with Robbie Phillips. I loved hearing how Robbie ties together practical examples from the lessons that he's learned throughout his career. As always, if you enjoyed this content and want to see more like it, then please take the time to share it with your partners and friends, and subscribe wherever you're joining us from. I've been Andrei Mandzuk, and this has been Mountain Mindset. Until next time.